Joining me now is Gordon Chang. And if you want to follow him on social media, remember it's at Gordon G. Chang. Woo-wee, there's a lot to talk about since we last had him on. China, Taiwan, Venezuela, so much. Mr. Chang, welcome back. Merry Christmas to you and Lydia.
Well, Merry Christmas, Brandon, and thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
Well, no, we appreciate your making time for us tonight. Okay, let's go right to China. What are we to make now with China and Taiwan? We just did, what was it? Correct me if I'm wrong, my memory, $11 billion in a package to Taiwan from the U.S.?
Yeah, $11 billion armed package. Beijing is furious. The Chinese military said that they were going to apply forceful measures, quote unquote. But I think that's really just a lot of bluff. And we know that because China just replaced the commander of the Eastern Theater Command. That's the command that has responsibility for the Taiwan area. So they're not ready to invade. But the point is that China is engaging in some very belligerent and provocative activities from a ring of nations, from India in the south to South Korea in the north. Any of those incidents can spiral into a conflict, and that, of course, would eventually involve Taiwan. But right now, the Chinese military is not prepared to launch hostilities by invading the main island of Taiwan. That's something they just can't do.
All right. So do you see a time frame for this or not yet?
I don't really worry about Taiwan being the start of hostilities. And there are a lot of reasons for that. Just give you two quick ones. This would be something that China has never done in its history, a combined air-land-sea operation. That means Xi Jinping has got to give some general or admiral almost complete control over the Chinese military, which would be making that person basically the most powerful figure in China. Xi Jinping, on his best days, isn't going to do that. And certainly he's not going to do it at a time where he very well may not control the Chinese military, because there are a lot of people there who don't like him for a number of reasons. But another reason why I don't think that Taiwan is the first target, very simple. The Chinese people would find that to be extremely unpopular. Now, the people in Taiwan think they're Taiwanese. They don't think they're Chinese by and large. But the people in China, because of indoctrination, believe that the people in Taiwan are Chinese. And Chinese people will tell you, whether they're officials or whether they're common folk, they say Chinese should not kill Chinese. So an invasion of Taiwan, which would result in perhaps hundreds of thousands of deaths, if not more, would be really, really unpopular. And especially the Chinese population right now doesn't want war. And it certainly doesn't want war with kin. So I don't worry about Taiwan. I do worry about Japan. I worry about the Philippines. I worry about other countries, but not really Taiwan.
Okay. And the reason you don't worry about Taiwan is because it would take both a land and a sea incursion?
Yeah, because essentially Xi Jinping has got to make somebody more powerful than he is.
But
and
Japan is open because why? Why would Japan or the Philippines be easier for them?
Well, I think it would be easier in a sense because the Chinese people would be much more behind an attack on Japan. The Philippines, the regime in Beijing is going after them because they think they're an easy target. So they think it's easy pickings. So these, I think, are more likely targets than Taiwan. But right now, the Chinese military is in disarray. And that means the military doesn't really want to fight. Even on good days, they don't want to fight, but they certainly don't want to fight now. Oh, actually, one thing I should say, they're more interested in fighting themselves than they are Americans, Taiwanese, or anybody else for that matter.
Has that changed in the last couple of years?
I don't think so. The military's been in turmoil now for about 2.5, 3 years. So I think people are much more concerned about the guy in the office next door than they are about us.
Okay, so maybe 3 years ago, you wouldn't have been saying these things.
I wouldn't be as convinced as I am now about this.
Which is good news for us, right?
That's good news. But the point is, Xi Jinping, I think, believes that a high degree of tension is in his personal interest because although he doesn't want a war, he thinks that tension would prevent other Communist Party figures from challenging him. That means Xi Jinping is going to engage in some pretty belligerent activities, as he has. If one of those activities goes wrong, I don't think that he can act constructively. I don't think he can de-escalate, because he has now configured the Chinese political system so that only the most hostile answers are considered acceptable. So I've never been more worried about war, but I haven't been worried about the war that other people are worried about. I'm worried about war starting in other ways.
Well, like what?
Let's say, we've seen this very dangerous seamanship in the South China Sea, and they've actually injured Philippines sailors. If they actually manage to kill them, that creates a dynamic that is really hard to stop. Because remember, we have a mutual defense treaty with the Philippines, and I think the Philippines would invoke it. And that means we have to then start doing things like protecting Philippine atolls and shoals, which we should have done in 2012, because we could have stopped this really from escalating. But the Obama administration decided not to do that at Scarborough Shoal. So right now we have a very arrogant and dangerous Chinese military. The Filipinos actually humiliated the Chinese about 3-4 months ago at Scarborough. And the Chinese have not forgotten that. So I worry about things really getting out of control there.
Let's talk about Japan. You put out that China has armed North Korea, Pakistan, and Iran with nuclear weapons. So why shouldn't Asia's democracies have them too? Should we be giving nuclear weapons to Japan to help them defend themselves against China?
I don't think that we should be giving them, but if the Japanese say on their own that they want to develop the world's most destructive weapons, which means they have to withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, I don't think we should stop them. We stopped South Korea and Taiwan from developing the bomb on multiple occasions since the 1970s. And that gives us, makes us, I think, particularly responsible for defending those countries right now, because we basically made them defenseless. We made them dependent on us. So we have a moral obligation, plus a strategic one, to defend Taiwan and South Korea. South Korea right now is going communist. So that's another story and a complication.
Well, I want to get to that. I definitely want to get to that one. But you bring up a very good point. If we don't want to see, people say America first, which I agree with, we want to worry about our borders and our internal security and all those things. But if we want to do that, we shouldn't be becoming the protectors of all these other nations and stopping them from achieving the national defense objectives that they have. And if we say you can't have these, Japan, Taiwan, now, again, it comes down to, well, do we want our troops involved? Do we want our sons and grandsons involved? No, we don't. So in other words, haven't we backed ourselves into this, is what you're saying, which I never thought of that till right now. So that's one reason why we bring you on, is so we all learn. But we don't want to send our sons and grandsons off to war. Well, maybe the lesson we need to learn here is let some of these countries be independent instead of us always, as America, trying to rule the world.
Yeah, well, first of all, that's certainly right. This gets a little complicated, Brandon, because we're going to have to stop the Chinese somewhere. And for more than a century, we have decided that we were going to make sure that no country in continental Asia would become so powerful that they could threaten us. Right now, once was Japan. Now it's China. So we have a real interest in defending our homeland as far away from our shores as possible, because we don't want to have to defend ourselves off the coast of Hawaii or California. And that happens if the Chinese are able to take Taiwan or Japan or something like that. They would surge into the Pacific. They would meet us in our shores. And exactly, we don't want that to occur. So, we Americans, for, as I said, basically since the 1880s, have decided that when we're going to defend ourselves, we're going to defend ourselves as far away from the homeland as possible. That's to protect our homeland. That's America first. It's a little complicated. It's not what most people would define as America first. But when we start thinking about the dynamics of what's going on, then why do we want to have the Chinese Navy sailing 12 miles from San Francisco Bay?
Yeah. Well, let's go to Venezuela. I want to go to South Korea here in a minute, but let's go to Venezuela. Because now they're right in our backyard, right? China, Iran, Hezbollah, Russia, they're all over there in Venezuela, 1,264 miles from Caracas, northern Venezuela, as a crow flies to Miami, as I say all the time. I don't know what they've got there. We've been saying since around 2008, 2009, somewhere there on our broadcast, people can find in the archives, we've been warning about missiles being set up in northern Venezuela. And then you got China having a deep relationship with Mexico right on our border. So we've got real problems now right in our literal backyard, if you will, right?
And we do. And it's not just Caracas to Miami, it's Havana to Miami. And, that's about 95 miles?
Yeah.
So, and it's actually a lot less from Havana to Key West. So, yeah, we know that we know in 1962 what happens when an extra hemispheric power places missiles on Cuba. And the Chinese are perfectly capable of doing that. China right now has 4, maybe 5 listening posts in Cuba. They took over the Soviet ones, including the biggest Soviet listening post outside of the Soviet Union during the Cold War, Lourdes, where the Chinese have now assumed control. But also China may have one military base in Cuba. We don't know about that, but we know that they tried to start building one. And of course, if the Chinese start putting missiles in Cuba, that's just 1962 all over again. So yeah, that's a big issue. Now,
well, you're familiar with Club K cars. It's in my documentary from 2018. So you're familiar with how these Club K cars work. You can get them. I think the last time I checked, I'll show a video here. It looks just like a regular container on a boxcar or semi truck, and you satellite signal, and up pops a couple silos with nuclear weapons, 2 to 4 silos, which is really interesting, Mr. Chang, because the cover of The Economist magazine, What's Ahead in 2026, shows a cargo container ship with missiles being shot off of it going into the 250th birthday cake of America, but it gets a signal shooting down to it from a satellite, which is exactly what's in my documentary in 2018 about these Club K cars. Now, we don't know, and all that to say, we don't know if these kind of things have been moved into Cuba. We don't know if these kind of things have been moved into Venezuela. And I know for a fact, talking to guys that are former military, retired recently, we don't have a very good system for knocking that kind of stuff down. You see on the screen right there, coming in from right off our coast. This is what's troubling.
I think the answer is, it's not only that we don't have a very good system. I actually don't think we have any system. So it's a little bit worse than that. Especially if these things are hypersonic, because we don't have very good defenses against any hypersonic missile, and especially one that is snuck up within, a dozen or so miles of the United States. So yeah, this is a big issue. When you think about all of these things, China's agents and operatives in our country at the same time, this is really, really bad story.
Yeah, well, it is. All right, let's move to a couple more before we let you go. What about South Korea? I mean, that country is, you said, headed communist, right?
Yeah, Lee Jae-myung, who's the president, he seized power. He did it legally, but he did it ruthlessly. Now he's destroying the independence of the courts. He is shutting off free speech. He's moving a country far closer to China and North Korea than it is to us. And the Trump administration has taken the position of just being quiet. I think it's time for, when Lee Jae-myung was in the Oval Office, I think it was August or something. Now, that morning, President Trump, to his great credit on Truth Social, said, this looks like a revolution or a purge in South Korea. And then he had a conversation behind closed doors with Yi. Then they made up. And I can understand what's going on, but Yi has continued this drift towards, first of all, destroying South Korea's democracy. And he certainly has moved South Korea closer to Beijing and Pyongyang. There's a lot of bad things going on here. And I think at some point the Trump administration's got to start speaking out in public, because this is really bad.
So when you think about back to Venezuela, Iran, Russia, China, Hezbollah all being over there, and we don't know what they've put over there and how long they've been putting it there. What do you make when China's, upset and making comments about the maritime rules and engagements with Venezuela and oil tankers? Are they just going to say we're upset, or do you think Iran and Russia join in with China? Do you, if you had to guess a flashpoint for America, do you think it's going to be something like a Venezuela this close to us?
I actually am okay with Venezuela, the situation there. President Trump is doing a great thing. These tankers that we are seizing, they are operating illegally. They're turning off their transponders, their GPS, they're flying false flags, they are operating outside of international maritime rules. If that was the only thing they were doing, we could seize them. But of course, they're carrying sanctioned oil. And what President Trump is doing is basically saying to Beijing, I'm going to go after your proxy. You can't do anything about it except huff and puff. And I'm demonstrating my political will. And that is a very important thing because that reestablishes deterrence.
I 100%
so
agree.
I love the idea that he's taking these tankers.
Yeah.
Now, it's especially important, Brandon, because on other things, Trump has not been tough on China at all. And the Chinese, I think, believe at some times that they can push him around. What Trump is saying in Venezuela is, no, you're not pushing us around.
Yeah, and I agree with you. To me, I know people have been upset about the bombing of the narco boats or narco terrorism. I think there's more to that than those drugs. The drugs are enough, but I think there's more to that. But I'm very concerned and have been, as the history of our website shows, about Venezuela being a beachhead in our backyard to these countries I keep mentioning. And I'm thankful President Trump is paying attention to it and trying to do something about it, because call me paranoid, but I think there's some very nefarious things going on, and it's way too close to us.
Yeah. The migrant caravans during the Biden administration, Brandon, that was not organic. Those were organized by Venezuela indirectly through NGOs that Caracas organized and funded. So, yeah, they've been assaulting us. And they did that because they wanted to tear down our border. In other words, to break down our sovereignty. So that was an attack on the U.S. You add in the drugs. Maduro is the head of the cartel of the Suns. Let's go after him. And a lot of people today, there are legitimate questions about the legality of hitting the drug boats. I mean, that's clear that's not entirely settled. But if somebody did not complain about the killing of Anwar al-Awlaki by Obama, who was, by the way, a U.S. citizen, if you didn't complain about that, then you have no stand-in to complain about the drug boats, which is more illegal than what Obama did to Anwar al-Awlaki.
Good point. And then you add in what may potentially have gone on there with voting and voting machines and other things that could impact our elections, right?
Yeah, it's all tied up. Venezuela is a bad actor. With Maduro gone, he stole the last election and the election before that. And, we just got to say enough is enough, and we got to start taking back the Western Hemisphere, because it's not just Venezuela. You've got all these other big Chinese projects, including the ones in the Canal Zone. Talk about a strategic threat. You have the Chinese ports at both ends of the zone, plus you have all of this Chinese infrastructure, including the Panama Bridge.
You talking about Panama?
Panama, including the fourth bridge that the Chinese are building over the canal, which they could take down and block the canal for a very long time. So yeah, I'm really worried about it. We got to get the Chinese out of the Canal Zone. We need to get the Chinese out of Panama. We need to get the Chinese out of Peru. We need to get the Chinese out of Venezuela. The list goes on and on. This is a long-term struggle. We can do it. I'm really, really happy that President Trump started the process of taking back our hemisphere.
I agree 100%. And that may make some people upset that somehow is, they don't agree with it. But you and I are in agreement big time. Yeah, because I'm I'm with you on this one for sure. I'm not with you on a lot of these issues, but this one, as we've said, is right in our hemisphere, which is so critical. Look at the website here, Twitter. You can follow him at Gordon G. Chang. Please get the G in there so you're following the right Mr. Chang, at Gordon G. Chang. And you can find out about his great books. His latest was author of the Plan Red, China's project to destroy America, the coming collapse of China. And is China going to war? You'll find them all on Amazon. They make great gifts, by the way. Not too late to get one or more of his great books on Amazon and give to family and friends, or do some holiday reading yourself. The Plan Red, that one is a small little book, vital reading. It's in my library right over here. I recommend all of you read it. And if you want to book him to be a keynote speaker at your event, we had him at our national conference. He was a huge hit. So I can tell you firsthand, it is well worth booking him in, fly him in, or drive him in, whatever he wants to do, but pay him a great honorarium to be there with you for your event. Your folks will love it. The content's amazing. And he's actually a really funny guy. He actually is very, very funny on stage, has a lot of good jokes, and he's funny. So he was very popular with our group, standing ovation at the end. I think he actually got one when he walked out as well. But Merry Christmas to you and Lydia.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to you, Brandon, and your family, and thank you so much, and stay safe. Because
you too.
It's just getting worse all the time.
Well, we're going to have a lot to talk about in 2026, aren't we?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, unfortunately. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chang.
Thank you so much.
Check him out on X at Gordon G. Chang. Again, I'll reiterate, you got to get the G in there if you want to follow the right Mr. Chang, at Gordon G. Chang. And as I said, check out his articles. He writes over at the Gatestone Institute. He's got great articles. We post some of them over at worldviewreport.com, the link to them back to the Gatestone Institute. So you can check him out there as well. As always, great to have Mr. Chang with us. And we will be right back after this short break.